Hi, everybody. I am Stefanie Kulberg, the Vice President of Marketing here at LaunchPad Lab. And along with me today is Ryan Francis, President and Partner at LaunchPad Lab. We are here to talk about digital intake. We're exploring all different sort of avenues of custom software development. And today we're going to dig into the digital intake process. So, Ryan, thank you first for taking the time to talk. I would love to just start by explaining what digital intake is. For those who may not be familiar with the term or understand what it is, I think that would just help kick things off.
All right. So digital intake, what is the use case of digital intake? So digital intake is really about how do you as a company enable customers to go through the process of becoming a customer through a digital process. So a lot of people call this like a digital front door. So imagine a doctor's office has on their website an opportunity, a way for potential new patients to go through and book an appointment and kind of put in their information, like their insurance details, to ensure that they are eligible to go to that doctor's office. That process, while it sounds simple, can actually be quite complicated. In the example of a doctor's office, you need to put in what you're, looking to, what service you're interested in. If it's a general checkup, if you have a certain condition that you're looking to get looked at, if you have a certain doctor that you preference, and then you have to determine whether or not your insurance is a good fit for that doctor's office. So
Interesting. I can totally picture that whole process. I've been through that myself many times. In terms of businesses, why is this something that's essential, that's critical, that they need to have as part of their process when they're creating a bespoke piece of software?
digital intake is a important part of any company in today's day and age. Customers expect to be able to do things online. They don't want to have to call in if they don't have to. And in many cases, the digital prowess of a company determines whether or not customers want to engage with them at all.
Excellent point, especially considering the fact that every business right now has some sort of digital presence. So you want to make sure that it's valuable. So speaking of that, I'd love to hear your perspective on the business value that digital intake offers.
So digital intake enables a few things. From a business value perspective, digital intake can help customers grow by bringing in a whole new channel of new leads. So if you have a really good digital intake process, then you'll have a better opportunity to do things like search engine optimization, search engine marketing, Google ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, because as you invest in, say, in a Google Ads campaign, you're paying for someone to visit your website. If you have a high conversion rate, if a high percentage of those people who visit your website end up getting through your whole digital intake process and becoming an actual customer, the value, the ROI on your initial investment to do that advertising goes up and allows you to be more competitive when you bid online. So you'll have the opportunity to increase your bids relative to your competitors because your conversion rate is higher. You can justify spending a little bit more per click for someone to visit your website than your competitor who has a non-existent digital funnel, digital intake funnel, or a lackluster digital intake process.
I love that, especially because businesses should and typically are focused on having some sort of competitive edge or competitive advantage. On that note, I'd love to hear your perspective and talk a little bit about the benefits. What are they? How is this impactful for businesses?
So yeah, the first business benefit as to why digital intake is valuable is in growth, is in driving new customers through your front door, your digital front door into your business. The second big benefit is in time savings. Many companies today don't have a great digital intake process, and what they rely on is humans on their team collecting data from customers in a more manual way. This is going to be prone to errors. It's going to be prone to people fat fingering important information, and it's time consuming. A lot of times this happens over a long phone call. Someone might have to, kind of guess at what the person is saying if it's hard to understand what they're saying. So a digital intake process can create more scalability in your business in the sense that you don't need as many humans to drive revenue into the organization. So growth, scalability, bringing down costs, these are all things that a great digital intake process can really help with.
Definitely three things that businesses should and do care about. I'd love to shift a little bit towards the how. So, if you're a business and you're thinking to yourself, I'm considering doing this, what really distinguishes good from great?
As far as like what makes a great digital intake experience, I think there's a few things that come into this. So every business is going to have a different brand, a different experience that they want to create for their customers. If you're in the financial services space, you're going to want to have an experience that feels professional, feels thoughtful, and comprehensive. So as someone comes in and they're going through a digital intake, they're answering questions about their investor profile, you're understanding their net worth, those kinds of things as they're filling that out. And it should have a look and feel that feels professional, like you'd expect from a financial advisor. It's very different from the look and feel you might expect from a startup who has a new dating app or something like that. That look and feel is going to feel more exciting, more edgy. It might have a more unique UX. But in all of these cases, the structure, the overall functionality takes similar shapes. You typically have a step form where the customer will hit some type of a button on your marketing site, like get a quote. That's a typical button. So I'll use the example of insurance. You're an insurance company. You want to create a digital intake process that allows a consumer to get a quote for an auto insurance policy. So you come into this auto insurance company's website, you click get a quote, and you're taken to a step form experience where you can basically provide the information that the business needs to ultimately give you a quote. So you go through a series of pages. Each page collects different information. The first page might want to understand how many vehicles you're looking to get insured. It might want to understand what those vehicles are, the VIN numbers. It might want to understand the drivers. So as you go through this step form, you're filling out each of those kind of pieces of information. And then once you get through collecting enough information, the business is then able to create a quote of here's what your insurance premium will be based on all the criteria set up, including the coverages that you want and things like that. So then the final step in that process might be to talk to an agent to get that insurance policy written. Honestly, even for that insurance example, you could take that digital intake all the way through in some situations to actually signing the policy. But that's kind of where there's some regulation in that industry that may or may not make that possible. But digital intake is basically the idea of, in an ideal world in insurance, you would completely intake the customer and get them set up with a policy without human intervention, all digitally.
I imagine a lot of people listening today can relate because they've all had that sort of intake experience going through that step form. What other cases are you seeing emerge? We've talked amongst ourselves, and I'd love to hear you share this with others who might be interested on how AI is sort of influencing this intake process and how businesses can use that to their advantage.
So step form is sort of the first typical way that a digital intake process happens. Another newer way that digital intake is happening is conversational intake. So what this entails is basically having an AI have a conversation with the customer to intake them into the organization. So this is a natural language chat experience that happens on the website where someone says, yes, I'm interested. And they are having a two-way conversation with an AI agent who is helping to build a package for that customer. Let's say a business is a manufacturing company that sells parts. A customer comes into this company's website and is interested in buying parts. They could have a conversation with an agent who builds out a quote for them. So they go through, they talk to the agent, and the agent is in the background building out a set of SKUs, quantities, pricing, and then ultimately the final step in that conversation is that, hey, here, I went ahead and created a quote for you. You can review it here. And that's an actual PDF that the customer can look at with the quote built out. They can then basically take payment and go ahead and process the order, right? So that AI agent based digital intake is sort of a new way of intaking customers. And that goes a step further than the traditional step form approach in that it's a less structured way to intake customers. You can allow AI agents to ask dynamic questions.
Wow, thanks, Ryan. Lots of lessons learned there. Thank you to those of you who tuned in to listen. We hope you found this valuable.